this isn't just about tweaking at the edges, is it, Stephen Donnelly, when you talk about reducing interest rates? It's about actually looking at what is the future vision for this country, what is the blueprint for a future Ireland which will keep young people who are leaving the country now and maybe build us into a contemporary, more modern society. Now, what would you do there then? Because you're surely you're not taking these major gambles and jeopardising the nice family that you have, in the sense that you'd have to spend long days in the Dáil and everything. You're not making those sacrifices just to be a player in terms of how to renegotiate with the IMF.
No, absolutely not.
You're doing it because you believe Ireland needs to be reshaped, I presume, in some way or another?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to get a political system that works for us. Right? The Irish political system right now, from what I can see, is a mechanism whereby rich and powerful people and rich and powerful organisations extract favours from the government. Right? So this morning we were meeting a lot of people who work in the social sector in Bray, and tiny amounts of money which have been cut from budgets are causing unbelievable suffering. But at the same time, we have ministers walking away with pensions of hundreds of thousands of euros. So, to my mind, our political system has become completely self-serving. They're paying themselves, like our Taoiseach is paid more than Barack Obama. Our ministers are paid more than prime ministers around the world. They're walking away with vast pensions. They're completely unaccountable. And they have failed us. So the system at a political level needs to be changed.
Okay,
right?
How do you change? Just take that
Two
one
things.
thing.
There's two things you do. What the political parties are all talking about is you change the rules, right? And we do need to change the rules. We need to have a conversation about whether to reform or abolish the Seanad. We need to radically reduce the number of TDs we have. We need to bulk up the opposition in terms of giving them access to the civil service so that they can actually hold the government to account. We need to do the same for ministers, who right now really are beholden to the Secretary Generals in the civil service, which is of no use. So we need to do all of those things, and the parties are coming up with good ideas around the various things we can do. There's a second thing which we have to do, which none of the political parties are talking about. We have to change the rules. We have to change some of the people.
People in what? In politics?
The politicians.
Okay.
If we re-elect the same people into our parliament, we are going to get the same results.
Okay, if you change the political system and you reduce the number of TDs, and either you get rid of the Seanad or you make those who work in it in a reform Seanad actually do the job properly in the first place, that's only part of the problem. How do you take something like our institutions, our public sector, civil institutions, so Department of Health being an obvious one. We all recognise that our health system needs dramatic changes. What do you do with a dinosaur like that?
You can do a lot, right? You really can. So at the moment, we're a country the size of West London, and we have the HSE and the Department of Health. We essentially have two departments of health. So we need one, right? So the first thing you do is you have one, and we all know that when the HSE was formed, it brought together the various regional health boards, and not an awful lot of people lost their jobs, and there wasn't a lot of savings. So we've got this huge bureaucracy that is very cumbersome and that is getting in the way of frontline services. So you radically reorganise it. You change the culture to one of accountability. Right now, I do an awful lot of work with frontline healthcare professionals and senior managers, not in Ireland, but I do it abroad. And I do it with people who are getting bashed in the same way that our public servants are getting bashed. And it's a very unhealthy thing for us to do, right? My experience time and time again is that public servants want to serve the public. But they get into a system whereby if they do anything right, they get no reward. They're unaccountable. So, there's no consequences for actions. They're not encouraged, they're not trained, they're not promoted based on their abilities. And they just get fed up and worn down.
But they stay in the system, and they're part of the problem for those who behave like that, and they've got trade unions who support them and back them. I mean, if you take on reforming the HSE and the health service generally, you're taking on trade unions there. Do you think there is the capacity to be able to do that? Bring them on board. You don't want to destroy the trade unions, but you want to be able to bring them on board in such a way that they will go and they'll implement your changes, but they won't destroy you in the process.
Yes, and you've got to engage directly with the civil servants. Take teaching, right? The OECD report, the PISA report, came out in December, which is the most credible report on how countries are doing relative to each other in education. And the PISA report showed that Ireland has had the biggest fall in educational standards in the developed world in a decade. Now, not just that other people are getting better quicker than we are, our education has fallen. We've been pouring money into education, and our standards have fallen, right? Now, here's what I see. I see politicians and Quango appointees and union leaders sitting in rooms in Leinster House talking about changes to the contract. Now, I know from my own experience in public sector reform, the only group of people who are going to turn our education system around, and it needs to be turned around fast, the only group of people who can do that are the teachers and the principals. The only group of people who nobody is talking to is the teachers and the principals. So we've got to change the conversation. You know, unions do not give you like one of the top 5 education systems in the world, right? In New Zealand in the 90s, their education system was falling very, very badly. They're now in the top 3 in the world. You know, and they engage the teachers and the principals. And they change the system such that school managers are promoted on ability. They network them. They gave them a lot of additional management training. They freed them up from a lot of the back office admin so that they could be mentors to the teachers and leaders of schools. They measured the performance of the schools and they held the principals accountable. Our teachers, one very telling fact, our teachers have the lowest number of vocational training days of any teachers in Europe, right? They need more training and they need more support and they need managers who can make them the best they can be, and then you hold them accountable. And that is how you get one of the top 5 or 10 education systems in the world quickly.